Hi. Um, so I am Laura. As most of you listeners have heard me with Jeff, I'm here with Lon today. Lon was gracious enough to lend me one of his pieces so we could read it together and make some edits. Lon, you want to take a second and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about where you are in your writing journey and a little bit about the piece we're going to look at today.
Sure. My name is Lon Varnadore. I've published a few books. I I don't even remember how many are like out and four, five, six, seven, something like that. And I submitted a piece to Laura uh, to look over. That's supposed to be the beginning of a co-author piece between myself and another guy named JP Rhineflesh, who some people might have heard of, maybe not. So
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so you skipped right over the fact that you've published several books. You started with two or three, and then the number went up. Where can listeners find your books?
um, pretty much, you can find everything on Amazon. There are others that are at other places, but the uh, one trilogy is on KU, so that's Amazon only. But everything should be on Amazon, and that's Lon E. Varnadore, Varnadore.
Excellent, excellent. And hopefully Jeff, who does all the magic of the podcasting, will put your link in the show notes or whatever they're called.
Yeah.
I am so it. You would not believe I work for a company that uses technology to train people, because I'm like, where's my Rolodex? Right?
Right. Yeah, I'm a quasi Luddite myself.
Excellent, excellent. I just found TikTok about 6 months ago. I lost 6 whole months to it, but I just found it recently.
Yeah, same.
Excellent. Well, great. Well, I guess we can continue chit-chatting about my lack of technology, or we can just take a look at the piece here.
I'm good either way. I mean, I have lots to say about both.
Excellent. Well, I tell you what, let's start with your piece, and
I
then we'll
suppose.
wrap up with technology at the
Okay.
end. All right. So this is a piece that you it's the start of a serial, right?
Yes, the very beginning of a serial.
Excellent. So what I loved about this is that you have two very distinct characters, and you use them to set the stage not only for their relationship, but also for what's to come. It's a little bit light, but it's also a little bit foreboding. So the relationship between the two characters is really kind of stunning, and the way that you're able to use them to get the story started without having to describe this entire world to me. I was able to just jump right into the story. So I really, really loved that. I hope that's what you were going for.
I mean, yeah, of course, that's exactly what I was going for.
Excellent, excellent. So this was a lot of fun for me to read. It's a different genre than I typically read. When I read for fun, I tend to go directly to murder mystery.
Mhm.
I'm not sure why, but that's what I tend to grab for first. I've done some reading in the sci-fi fantasy, which this kind of feels like it's leaning toward that side. Am I right in
It
that?
it's supposed to be sort of a science fantasy thing.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right, sounds good. So again, there have been a couple in the past that I've read, but it's not what I gravitate toward.
Mhm.
But what I always really appreciate a good sci fantasy story that can kind of bring me in the way some other stories do. So I think that you did a really great job with that. There are like 3 or 4 different things that we can talk about today.
Right.
So just so you know a little bit of my process, when I'm working with a writer for the first time, um, and I don't have a lot of time to talk to them about their piece beforehand like this. What I love about editing like that is I'm looking at a piece with fresh eyes, the way that a reader would look at the piece. So I think that really gives an editing eye toward what you're trying to do with your reader. But as an editor, there's always this like line about what is it that the author is trying to do and what does the author want for the reader to experience versus what I as a reader want to experience. So my first inclination was to just read it and be like, that looks great. Because as a reader, like you don't have the ability to change. But then I have to remember, okay, wait, I have to put my editor hat on and be like, okay. So I always read a piece straight through the first time just to kind of get a feel for it. What do I like as a reader? What am I drawn to? And immediately, like I said a little bit ago, I was pulled directly to the characters. The one thing I will mention about the characters, though, is I am a very poor reader in general. So words that I don't know and names that I don't know, I have a hard time with. So your two characters, Jex and Deg, it took me a minute to figure out who was who because they're both 3 letters and they're kind of like the reverse mirror image of each other or like reflection mirror images of each other. I am not at all suggesting that you change them. I'm just telling you this because as the editor, as I was going through and I was making some edits, and I actually did them on a different page, I kept mixing up the letters. So when you read them, you might have a Dex or a Jack. I'm like making up new hybrid characters for you because I don't know how letters work together to make words. So feel free when you see it happen to laugh and make fun of me because I don't know how words work. So, which is probably not the best promotional element to say about myself as an editor. Oh, I'm a super great editor, but if you want words to actually make sense, I'm not really your person.
Words are hard.
Right? Letters are hard. We have a joke in our day job that I'm not good with letters. And then they're like, but you're not good with numbers either. I have other skills I haven't figured about yet. Anyway, so it was definitely not a criticism. It was just an explanation of when you see my edits, they might be a little bit of a mess. Okay, so then as like my hybrid editor reader, I wanted to know how I felt about the piece because readers connect, and Jeff and I say this all the time, readers connect to stories from an emotional place. You know, one of the first things I felt about this was I want to go on this journey with these characters. I want to see what happens next, which I think is really great. So what I did, you'll notice when you gave it to me, this was not color coded. I added some color coding. So it felt to me like your scene had 4 emotional beats to it. This first emotional beat felt like 2 people who know each other well, just kind of being themselves. This second beat, kind of at the top part of the second page, is them kind of setting the stage for a plan. So instead of this like back and forth banter, it's like, okay, we still know each other really well, but we got to get down to business and we've got to make a plan. Then you get to this moment, and I had it all backgrounded in red, but then I went and I tracked some changes and you couldn't see the red. So I put the red band on the side. This is that emotional moment where we got to snap to attention. There's a moment of panic here. And then the last part, which I've done in gray, is the part of the scene where it's like, dun, 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 what happens next? There's a little bit of like hope. There's a little bit of foreboding. There's a little bit of like, what's going to happen next, a little bit of fear, a little bit of anticipation. That's what I felt as a reader. Was that what you were anticipating as a writer?
I will definitely say the last part, yes.
Okay.
I definitely wanted to keep that last part there. I did want to. I did also want to show that they did know each other. They have known each other for a while and everything.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if I would necessarily have sectioned it exactly, but I mean, yeah, like there is like the beat of they've gone back and forth, and then it's setting up the plan, and then that tense moment, and then
Okay.
so.
Excellent. Okay. So good. So now that I know that what I was feeling was kind of matching, even if we didn't kind of cut it at the same points, was kind of matching what you were going for with your story.
Mhm.
The next thing that I wanted to see is, can I take all the words out that aren't with inside the quotes and really be able to hear the two different voices distinctly? And in some places, I absolutely could. And in some places, they kind of melded together. Now, on one hand, I, as a strict dialogue doctor editor, I'm going to tell you, nope, they should never connect together. They should each be distinct. However, I'm going to caveat that by saying that one of your characters is a familiar,
Mhm.
which, again, not being big in the sci-fi fantasy world, I'm not sure where familiars fall exactly in the realm of genre, but what little I know about them is that they're like sort of part of the whole person. That's kind of, am I
Yeah,
one,
yeah.
instead of me guessing, you tell me what you were hoping for there.
The idea is that the familiar is there is a part of the the warlock in the familiar. So I mean, there is a part of him that is that familiar.
Got it. Okay. So were you hoping that the familiar would have a distinct voice, or were you hoping that the familiar would have a modulation of the same?
Um,
Or
I
maybe you haven't gotten that far yet.
I well, I would prefer him to have a their own voice, but there might be once and again they kind of like there is sort of a blending once and again.
Mhm. Okay,
For the
perfect.
most part, own separate voice.
Perfect. Okay, great. I love that. That's really great. So there's one other thing that I noticed. And again, I feel like this is a very genre-based thing.
Mhm.
You know, at the Dialogue Doctor, I say all the time, prose is unnecessary. I just want to read dialogue. You don't have to tell me anything else. I just want to write, like you all, anyone who has listened to this podcast is like, fast forward, play this in double speed. We don't need to hear Laura say this again, right? So, but what I did notice, especially in these first two paragraphs, you do a really great job of drawing me in right away with a line of dialogue, but then there's almost a full paragraph of prose. Then there's another line of dialogue, and there's an almost full paragraph of prose. It works because you're breaking it up for me. What I wanted to show you as an option, and this is, and I didn't do it here, I wanted to do a side by side
Mhm.
to show you what it could look like if you broke up the pacing instead of the longer paragraphs. And let's be fair, two sentences is not longer paragraphs for
Mhm.
most readers.
Right.
For Laura, 6 or 7 words, probably more than I need. And that's not true. I do read prose sometimes, but I just wanted to show you kind of the difference. And the reason I wanted to do it in a different document as opposed to tracking changes is
Mhm.
I wanted you to be able to see kind of the side by side differentiation
Mhm.
between what we've got here. So for those people who are listening to the podcast versus watching this on YouTube where they can actually see the screen, I'm just going to go ahead and do my best to read the first half of the page out loud, bearing in mind that, again, letters and reading. My spouse makes fun of me all the time because I'll read stuff out loud and he's like, that word doesn't make sense there. I'm like, but okay, it's not what it says. So please bear with me here. All right. You know, that's not the way that it's supposed to be. Jex buzzed in one of Deg's ears while he knelt in the dirt in the old, the dirt of the old road, sliding the tip of the makeshift wooden atham.
Yes.
Thank you. Around. It was made from a branch of this planet's version of the willow tree. And you'd know exactly how it's supposed to be, Deg asked his familiar while finishing up the last sweep of the makeshift atham wand. I'm going to get that wrong every time, Lon. Sorry. A small flurry of dirt puffing on his last flourish of the arcane glyph. He looked up and down the dirt road. The sparse forest of trees on either side was a screen enough for his work for the moment. I'm proficient in over 30 different combinations of these glyphs. All are accurate to the 0.00. Jex, yes, Deg, shut it. So what I got here is that you've got this Jex kind of know-it-all paired with Deg, who I didn't know what kind of person, creature Deg was, but it didn't matter. I kind of pictured him to be kind of gruff, a little bit like down to business. I don't really have time for all of what you're about, Jex, but you're here with me. That's kind of what I was feeling. But I did find that once I heard Jex say, that's not the way it's supposed to be, what I wanted to know was like, well, what is it? Deg, tell me about it, right? Like I wanted that immediate reassurance. I wanted a little bit of back and forth. So what I did is I just took the words that you had in the prose and I broke it up just a little bit. So, you know, it's not the way it's supposed to be, Jex buzzed in one of Deg's ears. Deg didn't take his eyes from the tip of the makeshift atham made from the planet's version of a willow tree, and you'd know exactly how it's supposed to be. So again, taking that same element and just moving your words around, so we get Deg's body language as opposed to the narrator telling us this element that Deg's is knelt down in the dirt, right? We can hear it from the body language. I'm proficient in over 30 different combinations of these glyphs. Jex buzzed again. So again, same line that you had down here, just broken up. Instead of all at once, we pull it out. Deggs ignored him and finished the last sweep of the makeshift atham wand across the dirt of the old road. Details that you had in the first sentence, I just moved a little bit lower to help with the pacing of the read.
Right.
All are accurate to the 0.000, Deg asked as the small flurry of dirt that puffed out from the last flourish of the arcane glyph began to settle. Yes, Dig, the familiar flitted higher, remaining next to Dex's ear as the warlock stood. I didn't know what kind of description you would use, so I just put it in brackets as man. Deg looked up and down the dirt road, grateful for the sparse forest providing screen enough for work. Shut it. Right? So same lines, but it gives you the opportunity. Now, because I wasn't sure what you were going for, if you were going for that traditional sci-fi fantasy where it's one line and prose and one line and prose, the way that you had it worked great. But this is just a different option that gives your readers a different way to integrate parts of the story in with the dialogue. So, and it doesn't have to be kind of an all or none. What I did is I took what you had and I pushed the pendulum all the way to the other side. So it was like tradition, dialogue, doctor. There's a ton of space in the middle there, right? So like if we were to work together moving forward from this, you know, we could say, all right, so I really like it the way the old one was. We don't need to make these kind of changes moving forward. Or you can say, you know what, I think I really like the direction that we're going with this, but maybe we pushed it a little too far. So maybe one or two of these things, but not every single one. So that's something that we could talk together about. Do you have thoughts on kind of the difference between those two?
I mean, I do like majority of the changes. The only I don't know, like there's a little part of me that's like the yes dag and then shut it. I kind of felt like I almost liked it better as it was
Yep.
versus that. But I mean, most of that is actually it reads better. It works a lot better.
Okay, excellent. So, and then this is the thing where as an editor, my job is to give you options
Mhm.
about what you can do.
Right.
But it's your story, it's your piece. You
Right.
as the editor have to make the decision of how tightly do you want those two things to go together.
Mhm.
By moving shut it away from yes dag, I'm putting more space to push dag into this, like, I'm not really interested in what you're doing. I'm
Mhm.
focusing on myself,
Mhm.
versus what you had before with the Jex yes dag shut it, was that more familiar joking kind of push pull.
Mhm.
Both work. It just depends on what you're going for with the relationship.
Mhm.
So, you can do this kind of any way that you want to. And then my job is just to kind of help you see that there are opportunities to move things around.
Okay.
So in this beginning part, I did something else in this beginning part. So as you were talking about kind of wanting Jex to have a very distinct voice from Dag,
Mhm.
as I was reading it the first time, I wanted Jex because the very first line you use the word buzzed with Jex. I saw Jex as this like gnat-like creature. And it wasn't until later, as you described Jex's form, that I started to see this picture. But
Mhm.
what I heard was just like this annoying little buzz that's hanging around. And then if we scroll to the bottom of what you all wrote, you've got that buzz over and over again here.
Mhm.
So what I wanted to hear with Jax's voice as an option, you don't obviously have to go this way, but I wanted to kind of show you this way of
Yeah.
pushing Jax to be like bzz, 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 short and in and out,
Mhm.
strong, hard, come at you and then back away, almost like if you were swatting at a fly, it gets close to
Mhm.
you, you swat at it and it's not there. By doing that, you can like push Dex, or excuse me, Dag. See, I told you I was going to do it. Dag back into that like gruff, I don't have time for you, get away from me kind of
Mhm.
role. So again, not anything that needs to happen, but just an option and an opportunity to show you what could be done with this voice.
Mhm.
Now, I want to say, as I'm editing both types of ways here to
Mhm.
show you what's possible, I took some editorial liberties that happen in order to show how far we can push something,
Right. Of course.
knowing that you as the writer are going to come back to this and be like, okay, Laura, you put information in here or you took away information in both ways of editing that you as the author aren't going to like,
Mhm.
right? It's part of the editing process.
Right.
When I take editorial liberties, I get to take editorial liberties. I get to write whatever I want, but
Right.
I'm not the writer. My job as an editor is to show you what's possible so that you can make the determination of this is what I like, this is the direction that I want to push. So like, as you're looking at these things, if you're like, Laura, you totally messed that up.
Mhm.
That's great. I know. And not that I'm intentionally trying to mess it up, but I am trying to push in that direction just to, again, I like to, until I get to know an editor, or excuse me, a writer, and have kind of a back and forth relationship within that editing. And not to say that every editing relationship has to be a long-term partnership, but it does have to be a short-term partnership, right? Like I have to have an expectation of what you as the author need, and you have to have an expectation of what I as the editor need, and that kind of back and forth thing.
Right.
Obviously, your needs as the author supersede my needs as the editor, But I really feel that writers who work with their editors in a way that they're both looking toward the collaborative vision of the author, I think really just makes the piece so robust, because it's all the different perspectives involved as opposed to a single vision. So, but that's just my little rant about editing. I feel like I'm surrounded in the dialogue doctor by a world of writers. So I gotta like put my kicks in where I can.
Exactly.
Hashtag vote action figures, not Legos, for anyone who's the last week's podcast. I gotta put my little, but I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I voted for the action figure.
Yes. Ha ha ha. In the Slack channel, I was going to make a note for everybody who voted for Legos to vote twice, because if you click it, if you click it a second time, it turns off your vote. But in reality, it's not a competition, because we know both tools are needed. It's just a matter of which one we want to build first.
Right.
So, anyway, sorry. Thank you for indulging my need to like not stay on topic here. Okay, so what I did in this version of the edit is I tried to stay really true to the pacing that you had initially, again, with this idea in mind that sometimes pacing is really intentional from the writer, and I, as the editor, don't know that. So I tried in this version to stay really true to the pacing and just change the dialogue or the word part of the dialogue, so you can kind of see the difference. Now, likely what's going to happen is you're going to see this and you're going to see that, and you're going to like different parts of different pieces, and you'll kind of find the meld that you like the best. And we'll kind of work together on that in a minute. But let me just go ahead and read this first part. And instead of reading it kind of all the way through, I'm just going to point out the places where I made changes. So in the original first line, it was, that's not the way it's supposed to be. Versus the edit that I made was, that's not the way, with an exclamation point. The difference being the first one is like a grandeur statement. The second one is a quick jab. Right? Like, I'm regal and you have to listen to me, versus I'm going to swat at you. Right? Like, again, depending on which direction you want Jex to be, both work. Not knowing this character, if you were giving me chapter 45 or episode 45, and you had spent 44 episodes creating Jex to be this like regal type character, me coming in and making this jab like edit would not make any sense. But you're at the beginning, so you giving me the beginning gives me way too much leeway to offer lots of different opportunities. So thank you, you're welcome, and I'm sorry all at once. Okay, so Deg's line doesn't change at all, except to change the reflection. Because what I really liked that what you did that Deg did was Deg used Jex's language with the supposed to be in the first line. So what I did was I just took that same idea when I made a suggestion to shorten, that's not the way it's supposed to be, to that's not the way, then that next line needed to change. And you'd know exactly the way it's supposed to be. I left an extra word in there though, right? So it keeps that same, like, you don't know better than me that Deg has in his personality, that I didn't want to lose, because it was so very like telling of who Deg is. So then we take, and this is one place where I did adjust the pacing in order to do this. 30 different combinations, Jex splitted. Again, I'm proficient in over 30 different combinations of these glyphs, very regal, versus 30 different combinations is a jab, right? The small flurry of dirt, again, the same information just moved. And then Jex says again, accurate to 0.00. Same thing he was saying before, we just pulled that line apart to make it like a jab jab, as opposed to, I don't know why in my head Jex is like pounding, fighting and boxing with Deg, but that's how I was reading it. And then you can, in this version, without changing anything else, Jex, yes, Deg, shut it. They kind of go together, they can stay together. And then moving forward, we didn't read beyond that in the first read. But the line that comes next from Jex I'm simply trying to help you stop the coven from, I am helping you with italics. This is an appropriate opportunity to use italics for those, you know, the great italic debate of 2021 that happened, right? Like, when do you use, when do you not use? The helping becomes the main piece. And then instead of helping you to stop the coven, it becomes a new sentence of the coven. Deg can still cut him off. And then a change to Deg here, instead of I know, don't mean you got to get uppity about my glyph work, can just mean, don't mean you got to get uppity about my glyph work. You can cut the I know, changes the pacing a little bit. Again,
I will tell you, I almost got that I know. When I was looking over this again, I was like, I want to, but almost.
So here's the thing about something like an I know. An I know can be really, really powerful, or it can change the whole pacing of a line. So for those people who have been listening to Dialogue Doctors podcast for a long time, when we first started talking about pacing, we used to talk about beats a lot. And a lot of times I stopped using the beats language because it was very confusing. People weren't understanding specifically what a beat was. So we started talking about pacing. Excuse me. But this I know versus ignoring the I know is actually a beat thing. So a beat is weird because it's one clump of words. If you're going back to like 9th grade grammar, it's a phrase, right? Like every phrase gets its own beat. So I know, don't mean, you gotta get uppity about my glyph work. Those are all beats. By cutting the I know, especially because there's a period there, it adds an extra beat that slows me as the reader down. I see Deg sighing, rubbing his mouth, and I know pulls me directly to a place that I'm stopping. Now, you'll notice we didn't read it in the first round. I leaned into that in the earlier edit where I was changing the pacing of the scene. And I made it Deg sighed, I know. He rubbed at his mouth. Don't mean you got to get uppity about my glyph work.
Right.
Because then you're taking that I know beat and you're making it really intentional, right? And then by rubbing his mouth in between, you're showing that he's holding the attention. And this is the beauty, right? Like, this is the beauty of cadence. It's an absolute perfect example where it's exactly the same line, but just by changing the order, you change the cadence, which changes my feel as the reader as to what direction that we want to go. So again, as the author, you're going to look at this and you're going to be like, okay, maybe I like the shortened sentences, but I don't like all the exclamation points you're putting in for Jex. Maybe that just pushes him just a little bit too far. Maybe not. Maybe you really like the exclamation points, but you don't like the shortened sentences. And what you want to do is you want to go to exactly what you had before, but instead of this comma, you make this an exclamation point, right? Like there are all kinds of different combinations in what it is that you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Again, you're at the beginning here, which means that this is the time to take a look at your character wheel of who you want Jex to be.
Mm-hmm.
You want him to be a familiar, so you want there to be the opportunity for some overlap. We stopped reading before we got to that part of the scene, but after Deg cuts Jex off, Deg thinks something,
Mm-hmm.
and Jex says, "I heard that," right? I thought that was such a great play between the two of them that they don't even really need to talk. I thought that was really fun. But again, that "I heard that" felt to me like that jab that I made suggestions of edits for with the earlier language, versus if you want that regal voice, I would actually take the "I heard that" and push it the other direction and make it sound something like, "Deg, we've talked about this. You need to stop thinking things like that about me," or whatever. And again, that's an editorial liberty that I would put in a parenthetical. Actually, I would do it as a bracket, not a parenthetical, a bracket, and be like, placeholder here, push the regality of this, versus that like taunting nanny nanny boo boo, right? Like it just kind of depends on what direction you want to go with his voice. But like many things that I do in editing, I'm going to take something and I'm going to push it to the other extreme to see kind of what's possible in the realm. And likely you as the author are going to go, you know what, I like this part and I like this part, and we need to kind of merge those together.
Right.
So now that you've heard some suggestions for that first part, what are you kind of thinking that you'd like to see as you go forward, or do you need more time to think about that?
Kind of need more time because I'm not sure. Because there are times when I like the Jex being that, bzz, bzz,
Mm-hmm.
and but there are other times where it's like I also want him at times to sort of be this, uh, going off and sort of being a little, almost almost to the point of pontificating.
Yep. And I can see that here in this green section where they're kind of planning, right? So this is a modulation. So if you decide that you want Jax's voice when it's just the two of them and nothing is really important going on, Meg has got work to do, but Jex doesn't really do anything but be part of who Deg is, then that's when Jex gets that kind of annoying voice, because it's like, I'm bored, so I'm just going to be kind of snooty and mean and just push your buttons because I want to play and you're busy and you don't have time to entertain me, right? Like if that's one of the modulations that you have, then you can take that modulation of this, like, I'm part of you, so you are integral to who I am. Like I am not a physical thing, though I do like it when you have him change into a cat. I thought that was really fun. So like if that's one modulation, then the next modulation can be, okay, so now that I have your attention, I'm going to make you pay attention to me by using as many words as I possibly can.
Mhm.
But what I wouldn't do is I wouldn't change his punctuation. So if you like this, that's not the way, exclamation point. 30 different combinations, exclamation point. I am helping you, right? Like if you like that emphasis in the language, then you can keep that as you go in here. So it becomes, nope, came along to help with capture. It might not be about you. I'd probably cut the this time in this
Yeah.
one. There are other, and then I would either emphasize the apostates or the this planet, right? Like something that uses that same, and this becomes a cadence piece, right? Like it's the same cadence. So you're using the same punctuation, but your word changes, your pacing changes. Instead of these short jabs, it's okay, now I've got you by the shirt. You're paying attention to me, so I'm going to hold you here and I'm going to make you listen to me until I'm done talking, right? Those two modulations couple together really nicely. They're really believable. If you decide to go with this jab version, you have to make a change to the modulation in this section to make it feel like it's the same person. If you decide that you like the regality of it, again, I would push that here. So if you decide you want to keep the regal voice, regal people don't say no. No, they would say, that is not the way that it is happening in this instance. Jelkins, did I say that right?
Jelkins.
If Jelkins came, was part of the mission to ensure that capture was successful, right? Like if you're keeping that like elevated language of maybe I have years and years and years on you, so you have to listen to me because of all of my experience and I'm going to rub it in your face all the time, then you're going to want to push that, especially in a situation like this where it feels like they're kind of planning and they're looking, and Deg really should be relying on Jex, because it feels to me a little bit like Jex is supposed to be helping Deg, but Jex is kind of annoying and Deg is kind of like too proud to take any help. So instead of working together, they're kind of like clashing. And again, maybe that's not what you were trying to go for in their relationship. But that's kind of the way it felt with the words that were in here.
Okay.
So I don't know. I hope those edits there help.
No, very much so. Very much
okay,
so.
Great. So the one thing that I will note from a story beat perspective, Jex turns into the cat right around here, but I didn't understand when Jex returned back to their other form.
Okay.
So either I missed it in the read, which is completely possible, or it's something that you might want to pull to attention a little bit stronger. So go ahead.
So you think that he changed back from the cat to something else?
It felt to me like he was supposed to, but maybe it's because you went back to the language of Buzz, which made me think that Buzz was here because Cat would be on the ground meowing. So maybe it was just my like visualization of what was happening based off of the language.
Okay.
Oh, and actually it says here, Jex gave a buzz of annoyance and floated away from Deg. So I guess between the buzzing and the floating, didn't feel very cat-like to me, unless so.
That was a screw up. That was supposed to be that was a different line that I moved and cut and paste thing.
And this is why you have an editor come in and read. Like if you take away nothing else, if you walk away from this and are like, Laura, you just have a lot of stuff to say, but really the only thing that I'm going to take away from this is I need to figure out where Jex is a cat and this other being, and that's great too. It works for me. I'm just glad that that I could help in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
Okay, so the next kind of part of the scene is this moment of excitement, right? they make this plan. And for those of you who are listening along and maybe haven't been able to read what was on the screen, you've got these two characters in the story who are planning and plotting. Feels like they're trying to protect maybe a planet from the bad people. Again, we don't really have to know all the details of everybody, which I really appreciated you as a writer not trying to explain every element of backstory to me in the first episode, right? Like, I think it's one of the things about that draws me so far away from science fiction is so often in a science fiction, you have to give me the whole world because you think I need to, not you specifically on here, you as writers of, and it works for a lot of people, for a lot of readers, for a lot of stories, the backstory works. I'm not a backstory person, right? Like we talk about this all the time. And I am not every single author's primary target audience. I get that. I totally understand that. But because this is like a short entrance into the story, I really appreciated that you and your writing partner made this decision, because I'm assuming that this is an intentional decision and this isn't just kind of, well, we accidentally forgot to leave out the whole backstory. So
no, this was this I didn't want to just front load everything with it. So yeah, I did. That was a choice.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I loved it. I thought it was great. And again, I know you're not writing just for me, but sometimes I feel like as an editor, because I get like an early version of it, I'm like, oh, this is just for me. Of course, that's just my inflated sense of self. But that's okay too. Okay. Yep.
Can I get like a 10-second break?
Sure. Absolutely.
So
yep.
Sorry.
Yep. Oh no. So everyone, I apologize. I was trying to pause the recording, but I stopped sharing the screen. So I will just kind of talk to you. I don't know if that's going to be interesting. See, now if Jeff were here and this was Jeff, he would have something really important to say about like morality and about how writers want to save the world. And I'm just an editor, so I can't think of any interesting content on my own. I need somebody else to guide the conversation. You okay? Do you need longer? Because now I figured out how to pause the recording.
I just need to turn on lights because my girlfriend's coming home from work. Oh. And so she needs like a way to see.
Be able to see. Well, that is very nice of you to know that and to make that happen for her. I hope she appreciates it.
Hope so.
Okay. So, all right. So this next part, what I wanted to, as a reader, what I wanted in this part is I wanted a sense of intensity, right? Like, here are these two people, elements, whatever they are, this warlock and his familiar, and they're just kind of like going along. They're obviously planning for something. It feels like they have all the time in the world to do this. And then all of a sudden, Jex's head snaps towards town. Dex felt it a moment later, right? Excuse me, Dag felt it. I'm going to do it all the time, Lon. I'm sorry. Dag felt it a moment later. That intensity to me felt like I needed a quick exclamation. They're coming. The original line was, the coven is already there. They're coming. To me, that felt like, it didn't feel like we're snapping toward town. They felt separated from each other. You have a friend there behind you. Hello, friend.
That's Artemis.
Hello, Artemis. I feel like Artemis has joined us for past podcasts. Yeah. Okay, excellent. Well, Artemis can be a regular on the show. So anyway, so then Dag takes this opportunity in the next line. Dag felt his stomach twist. Could have told me earlier. Who did they, right? Like, so I took out the could have told me that earlier because it felt to me like if they're in this moment of panic for like, oh, wait, we thought we had all the time in the world to make this plan, and now we have to do it right now. It didn't make sense to me. It didn't feel true to the moment for Dag to take that opportunity to swat back at Jex. I can see it happening later, like when we get back into the gray, it feels appropriate for Dag because now they figure, by the time we get to the gray, they figure out what they're going to do again. Mm-hmm. So like going a little bit back to maybe not to the same as they were before, mm-hmm. but it felt to me like an inappropriate time for Dag to go after Jex. Now, if from an author's perspective, no, Dag really needs to be angry at Jex, then I'd go the other way. And I'd push it further and I'd say, Dag felt his stomach twist. You should have told me that earlier, right? Like blaming versus this like, you're annoying, why didn't you do what you were supposed to do? Whatever you do here, whichever direction you push them, I would bump the intensity because that's what I, as the reader, crave. The minute you tell me Jex's head snaps toward town, you have my attention. I'm leaning forward. I need you to hold me there with this intensity. Mm-hmm. Everything gets really short here in the pacing because when you shorten the pace or when you shorten lines to quicken the pacing, I, as the reader, don't have time to do anything else but be right here in this moment with them. And you naturally did this by lessening the prose that's around it. Mm-hmm. I just took that and I just pushed it just a little bit further. And this works regardless of any of the changes that you make in any other places. You're just going to quicken the pace. And it's only, for those of you who can't see it and are just listening through the podcast, it's only about 11 lines that we do this. And then we kind of go back to the regular pacing. So it's quick, short. Who did they? Dag, from Dag, it's Lynn, Jex said. Void, take them all. Initially, you had the name hit hard. Dag tried to bite back a curse. You don't need that. Just tell me, right? Like, right. Just let him yell that. Show me that that's what he's feeling, because I know Void, take them all, right? Like I don't know what the void is. Doesn't matter. I can tell that this is a curse in here, that like there's this moment. So then Jex was silent for a moment. His eyes flipped back and forth as if he was reading something. Well, what's he reading? I want to know, right? Like, and then now you have this opportunity to go back. And this is, again, where I took an editorial liberty of moving the content from Void, take them all. How did they get by us? To Void, take them all. Jex has a line. How did they get by us? Versus 2 lines from Dag and then 2 lines from Jex. Just breaking them up keeps that pacing moving, keeps me this like, oh my gosh, what do we have to do? What do we have to do? Right. Again, with the line, they arrived quickly versus they arrived here earlier than I expected. Mm-hmm. Just keeping me moving there. They went in and attacked Lynn's family. They attacked Lynn's family and grabbed the boy. Again, that urgency of we have to get this information out as quickly as possible. Dag originally said we should do something. If we change the what should we do, we should do something to what direction are they headed, you're changing the focus of this, what's happening, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we should do something. Well, they're going this direction. Okay, then we can do this. Feels like it feels like it slows the pacing down versus the sense of urgency, with where are they going, right? Like, and it doesn't have to be which direction are they heading. It can be tell me more. This can be an opportunity where Dag like growls at Jackson, is like, use your powers, or whatever it is that you want to share with the audience about who Jag's, what his or their powers are. That's a good opportunity to do this.
Right.
Jex had a longer line here. Jex was saying, what? They are already moving. They will be coming down this road. If you make the question specific to where are they headed, you can cut most of that down this road. And then you can go right back into the pacing that you had and the cadence that you had with this last line, then stick with the plan. This just became a snatch and grab, right? Like, now you have me. Now we have gotten past this incident of how I have to pay attention to what's happening, into this moment of, okay, now I can go back to what we had in the pacing and the cadence of the green, because we're planning. They're heading this way. I know I have to move faster than I moved in the green, but I don't have to stay in the red, if you will. So for those of you who are kind of looking for a tip, and Lon, I apologize for moving away from the focus off of you to like letting people who are listening. What I've done is I've color coded the episode that Lon gave me. The first part I put in yellow, because to me, yellow meant like sunshine and friendship, and like these are two pals like hanging out. You can use any color scheme that you want. It just made sense in my head. When they were planning, they had a purpose. Purpose is like action. Action to me is green, because you know green means go. And then when we got to this inciting incident, I made that red, because it's like, hello, I have to pay attention here. And then I made the end part gray, because dun, 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 things could be really dark or things could be really light. And that's what gray meant to me. So color coding is something that I do when I'm editing, when I want to see the distinction between different sections of a piece, when I want to see where we should start a transition. Now, the transition from the green part where they're planning to the red part is a harsh transition, and it should be, because something happened in that moment. Whereas when we went from the yellow to the green, you mentioned earlier, Lon, that might not have been where you drew the line between, hey, this is their friendship, and this is where they're actually doing some of the planning. And part of that is because when you're color coding, it's a little bit weird, because there should be overlap. We should start seeing some of the green in the yellow and some of the yellow in the green, right? Like they're gonna mesh in there, because that's what happens in natural conversation. We get some, you get some, back and forth, right? Like it changes. You can get a harsh line here, and then again, you did a really nice job as you were moving out of this emergency situation to still a rush, but not at the same. So it's kind of like the green, but it's kind of like the red. And everybody knows that when you mix green and red together, you get gray. You don't, you get brown, but we can work with it. So, but it's just for me, it's just a way of visualizing different parts and different emotions. I like to use colors. You can do lines with this. You can put notes in your margins. You can do kind of whatever you want. I like to do colors because colors represent emotions a lot. Anyone who saw the movie Inside Out with all the different balls, right? Like each emotion had a color associated with it. So I don't know if that's a tip that anybody feels like they can use as they're editing their own work, but it's something that I just wanted to share. So, all right. So this last section in here, I didn't make any edits directly in here, because whatever you do in the early parts about your cadence and your pacing, of your characters is going to need to be reflected in this last part. And then there's the element that you are going to look at as opposed about whether Jex remains a cat or returns to their teaching state. Both, I think, actually work really well. I do like in here how you start talking about how Jex fits into a piece inside of Dag. The one thing I would note as you're going through and you're looking at the edits here, I'd be careful not to get too far into Jex being either that annoying jabber or into this regal pontificator in the scene, because you want to make sure that you're maintaining that like forebodance of what's to come next, right? So like this part here, if you want to cause the spell to fail, then yes. This feels like he's pushing just a little too far to the, like, we have all the time in the world to get this right, right? Like when Dag says that'll do, Jex should like, and this again is based off of like, what do you want their relationship to be? Do you always want Jex to be the one who's like, you're not good enough, you don't have enough? Or is it the teacher who does the, you're not good enough, you're not good enough, you're not good enough, but when you get in the game, I'm going to be your biggest champion? Like, what kind of relationship do you want them to have? So that's one of the questions that I had for you in here, is to like, is this really the right place for Jex to say this thing? Or it's, okay, it'll do for now, or let's just hope that they follow the plan, or something that shows the opportunity that it might not work, but also shows that he has a little bit of, right? Because then it makes this Dag rolling his eyes, got no trust in my abilities. If it's not this outright, like, you're going to fail, this got no trust in my abilities becomes fun again. This just feels mean. So like, and maybe that's what you want from Jex, but if you want Jex to be kind of that mean, regal, whatever, then make sure you lay the foundation for that in the earlier part of the story.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Very much.
Excellent. I love ending the line with, I hope this works, because it shows like there's a possibility that it might not work. And I think that you all ended the scene at exactly the right place. You didn't go too far. You didn't end it a little bit too early. I just make sure in this section that there's enough of a, okay, we're working together on this, or this is your game and I'm out of it from the Jex side. But either way, I think you've got a really great story here. So is there anything else that you were hoping to see in the edits or to hear from me today?
Not that I can think of.
Okay. Well, great. Well, thank you again for giving me the opportunity to read your piece. I was really excited to learn about who your characters are. I hope I did not slaughter their names too terribly much. But yeah, I definitely, so if I were reading this on Vela or whatever forum you all are planning to put it on, I would definitely want to turn the page and read the chapter. I think you definitely have some strengths here. Again, the suggestions that I gave you can just kind of help you clarify who the voices are. You know, and you are a seasoned writer. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing the screen here for a minute. You are a seasoned writer, so you probably don't need this tip. But for those of you who are listening who maybe are kind of starting a new book or a new journey, this would be the time after you've got a short story. It doesn't have to necessarily be the first in your series, but once you kind of have the outline for what you're going to write, like the basis of it, now's a good time to stop for a few minutes and jot down kind of what you think that you want for your characters and how they work together. Using some of the tools that Jeff has posted for the character wheel, and going back and kind of listening to the dialogue Daisy and thinking about how personality is influenced by background of the character, and then how personality and background influence the character's voice and the relationships they have. Now's a really good time to kind of do that before that you move forward, and thinking about some of the things that we talked about today about the relationship between Jex and Deg can really do that and kind of help can help as you're writing with some of that planning. Now, of course, if you are a pantser in your writing and you just want to write, that works too, because you can always go back and make changes like this as you're editing. It's a little harder when you're doing something like that's episodic, where you're putting things out, because you can't go back and change the early stuff as much, but there's always a trick. You can always create some kind of emotional crisis that changes a relationship. But yeah, that's just my last little tip. And again, Lon, you've done this often enough that you might not need that, but maybe somebody who's listening might need it. So
good for a refresher.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording.
Right.